In one of our recent videos, we were looking at Road 96 and how important the story actually is. Well, not necessarily the story, but the overall journey. So much so that the journey being more important than the actual ending. And in it, we kind of saw how the music, how the memories, and how the people and the interactions are so important for you to get to the end of the journey than the ending itself. In it, the game is quite well created in such a way that it really takes on how beautiful the journey actually is. One of the things that we didn't actually do is go in history, especially around the overall game itself. And I think that in this game, there's a whole lot of history that the game really doesn't tell you, but you actually have to play it. Welcome to Patched, everybody. My name is Thomas, and one of the things that we want to uncover today is what is really happening in Petria. The setting for Road 96, you find that it's created somewhere in the 90s. And it's actually quite significant because you don't see many games that focus on the 90s. You find some games that are focused around the 60s, the 70s, some in mythological eras, some they look more to the medieval times. Others, you find that they're more closer to the future or much later on in the future. But not many games actually focus on the 90s. Which is not really that bad. The 90s was a really fun time. We didn't have too much to worry about in terms of cell phones, computers. We all pretty much played outside, and we were told to get home by the time the lights actually come on from the streets. If we missed that time, we'll definitely get a nice whooping the time that we get home. But I digress. The 90s, great time. Petria, the setting, basically puts you in a bit of a deserty type of feel. There's not many big towns that you see, and if you see a town, maybe you might see it from a distance, but you won't really go into a town. It brings you into small little areas that you are able to play within the game, and it's a mix of a whole lot of desert, some form of forests, but the theme is pretty much deserty in many ways. Now, while you are on your way to the border, you are trying to get away from some form of political turmoil that is happening. And in this is where the story actually is in. The story is actually centered around a lot of politics. And while you are a teenager trying to run away, you are trying to make a change where your voice actually isn't heard. And that's the primary setting of Road 96. The central theme of the game and the story revolves around the events that took place during the first elections where Tyrek was looking to run for president. This is somewhere in the 80s. But where you are playing now, and what I'm trying not to spoil is the overall story, is that you're in the second part of his elections, or the second term of elections that he's trying to win. Now, what happened within the previous elections or the first elections is that there was a group that goes by the name of the Black Brigades, and what they were trying to do is they were trying to stop Tyrek from winning the elections because they knew the way that he was going to lead the country, or Petria in this case, was not going to be, let's say, democratic or in a way that is actually good for the people. They tried to stop him, but what Tyrek kind of did was plant bombs somewhere on the mountain, and he pretty much destroyed it. And what that led to is a lot of people being buried under the rubble from the fallen debris from the rocks. And pretty much what happened was that there was a lot of people who had lost their lives. This, trying not to spoil too much, is a bit of the history of the elections themselves and the Black Brigades. The Black Brigades have always been there just to try and make sure that they protest and they save the country as much as possible. One of the themes around the game is that the people that you actually do meet have some form of connection to the brigades, some have some form of connection to the elections, and they have some history in terms of Tyrek's first term. And that is pretty much what the elections and what the history of the game is about. And each missing teenager uncovers a little bit more about what really happened within the game. I'm trying not to spoil it too much here, but what I'm getting at is that pretty much the game revolves around one, the elections, and two, the Black Brigades and the members of the Black Brigades in this case. Now, looking at the game and looking at how the elections are set up, you can see that it draws a lot of its influence, especially around how elections take place, pretty much from what the Americans do. So you get your Democrats and you get your Republicans in many cases. And while Tyrek is one of the candidates, you also find another candidate who goes by the name of Senator Flores. And that is the person you're trying to get into power because, well, what we've seen with the history, Tyrek kind of throws all the kids into the pits, especially those who do not want to agree to his way of ruling. And you don't want to really end up in the pits as one of the teenagers. It's not a fun place to be. So with the elections, you're trying to make sure that you're able to break Tyrek's rule. And you can do this as one of the teenagers throughout your many playthroughs on the game by affecting the elections in many ways. You can encourage people to vote for Flores, which is a really easy way to do that. You do that through the interactions when you're speaking to the different people within the game. And most of the people actually have some form of connection to the brigades in any case. Now, you also have the ability to vandalize Tyrek's posters, but also be careful, you can also vandalize Senator Flores's posters as well. You're also able to donate to Flores's campaign. You are able to find the number that you are able to call and you will donate to her campaign, and that will actually increase her voter coverage. You also have the ability to choose certain dialogue options within the game that will influence the many characters that you will interact with in order to sway their vote or sway the people within their area to vote for Senator Flores. Now, while the elections are part of, are very much core part of the game, everything that you do impacts the elections quite a lot in many ways. So whether you're a teenager who wants to see a Flores win, or if you kind of want to go for the ending where you still get Tyrek to win, you still are able to play it in any way that you like. But ultimately the goal, especially from a teenager standpoint, because you don't have a voice, you're not going to be able to vote while you're trying to escape the country before the elections, before there's another potential Tyrek win. You're trying to sway the vote as much as possible so that it goes to Senator Flores. So again, the game itself focuses so much, especially around politics, but it also focuses around what happened to the brigades early on. So you're trying to save as many teenagers, you're trying to get as many teenagers away from the pits as possible, but you are able to sway the elections in some form or way. Now, while you are playing Road 96, you'll actually find a lot of core characters. Now, I had mentioned earlier on in the game where we looked at the core or the Black Brigades. There's a lot of people who've had a lot of history, especially around the elections themselves. And most people within the game that you will interact with have some form of significant role, especially to the game, to the elections, as well as the endings. So I'm not going to get into too much detail, especially around their background. I'll do that in another video. This is primary to look at the history of the game itself. So a few of the characters that you interact with, one of them is a reporter who goes by the name of Sonia. She is primarily institutionalized as Tyrek's frontman or front woman in this case, to spread his agenda, especially to make sure that she's able to win the hearts of people within Petria through her message of Tyrek's greatness. Alex, who you'll meet in the game, is pretty much a tech genius, a little bit of a hipster, but he is pretty much a tech guru in his own right. He goes around with a little laptop, he's always fiddling, he's always playing some games, but one of the things about him that we can easily tell in the game is that he is a genius. He is a very good at his technical craft. Jared, who is a mysterious taxi driver, we don't really know much about his history in the beginning, and we always are terrified of this guy. Primarily what you're seeing is that he's out to kill Sonia, but you find out a whole lot more about his past and what his tie to the Black Brigades is and what he's trying to do. I'm not going to give too many spoilers, but basically his history is so deep and so beautiful to the storyline that you actually find a way to, you find a way to have a bit of compassion with what he's going through. Zoe, who is a rebellious teenager from a privileged background, actually is somebody who opposes Tyrek's regime. In this case, she's trying to make sure that Tyrek also goes down. She's trying to make sure that she also escapes because she is one of the characters who is a fellow teenager as well. But she is also against Tyrek's rule. So she has an important role to play. But basically, Zoe is somebody who is quite core to the storyline and core to the ending as well. Stan and Mitch, which are a pair of goofy bandits who always have a weird sense of humor, and in a way they are serious whenever they're trying to either rob a bank, trying to rob you, or basically trying to be bandits in a way. They kind of are good at what they do, but some of the times they're not really great at their job. But you find out a lot about these characters the more that you actually play. Fanny, who is a police officer who's basically torn between her sense of duty and morality, is a interesting character who's in between the brigades and in between making sure that she actually keeps the law. She also has a bit of a deep background. She also has some form of tie in with the Black Brigades. You actually find out a lot about her story a little bit later on in the game. And John, who is a truck driver, is somebody who is a core member in the Black Brigades. He's trying to make sure that he is able to stop the elections. He has a bit of a device that is going to assist with the elections themselves to make sure that Tyrek does not win in any form or way. But pretty much he is somebody who is a member of the Black Brigades, and he is a core member in the story as well. Everybody has a part to play, especially within the whole story, and the more you actually play, the more you play through the game, that is when you are able to unpack a lot of the story, a lot of the people's backgrounds, and you see a lot of the history forming, especially within each interaction that you play, or within each interaction that you have with each of these core people. Now, like I said, in the game you play as a multitude of missing teenagers. Now, you take control of these teenagers. You never actually interact with other teenagers that you've played, but the decisions that you've made with a previous teenager before you've gone to the next episode kind of influence the next playthrough or your next run towards the border. So the choices that you do make, I said this in a previous video, the choices that you do make before have a whole host of impact, especially around all the decisions that you make, the people that you interact with, the way that you are moving them towards, whether it is more towards a violent way of winning the elections or a more peaceful way of winning the elections, or even just stepping away from the voting at all. Now, for each of the teenagers, right? For each of the teenagers that you do play as, their role actually influences the story. So this is where you come in as a player. You are trying to either sway the elections to a more of a Senator Flores win or more of a Tyrek win or somewhere in between. Depending on how you play, you get different endings. The more of Road 96 that you play, the more that you see how all of the stories are connected. But a core theme, as I had mentioned before, is pretty much how the elections play out. Who the brigades are, we'll look at that in another video. But ultimately, you kind of see that Petria is a country or a state. I'm not too familiar with how the Americans do it, but I'd like to say that it is a country. So thank you for watching this video on what's been happening in Petria. And if you've missed it, we've covered a little bit around the overall journey that you take towards the border in a previous video. We'll link it specifically at the end of this one. And we'll look at a few more details or a few more interesting facts around Road 96 and how deep the storyline actually is. We'll look at some of the characters and their backgrounds, with a couple of spoilers there. And we'll also look at some or the true history of the Black Brigades a little later on as well. But with that being said, this was the video on Road 96, and we hope to see you again in the future. Do take care. Bye.